Following my popular previous head-to-head article featuring the battle of the AMD Ryzen 2700X versus Intel Core i7-9700K, how could I leave it there and not take a look at the more affordable end of the spectrum and dip down to 6 cores? This time there's even less cash separating the two, which are of course Intel's Core i5-9600K and AMD's Ryzen 5-2600X, which retail for $274.99 and $199.99 respectively. However, in percentage terms, that difference is much greater, seeing as we were talking around $350 with our 8-core CPU battle. At this end of the market at $200 minus $270, that $70 price difference is much more significant. It's enough to buy you a 256 GB Samsung 970 EVO. There are other facts working against Intel here too. The Core i5-9600K has much lower boost frequencies than the Core i7-9700K, with a maximum boost of 4.6 GHz compared to 4.9 GHz, while the AMD Ryzen 5-2600X has just a 100 MHz deficit compared to the Ryzen 7-2700X. As the title says, I'm only comparing the two 6-core CPUs here, but there's another processor that the Core i5-9600K is competing against, the Ryzen 7 2700. It has fairly low frequencies, but sports 8 cores and 16 threads, and costs about the same. Even compared to the Ryzen 5-2600X, though, the Core i5-9600K has issues. It has significantly lower amounts of cache, and like the Core i7-9700K, it lacks hyper-threading, so only has 6 threads. Combined with lower frequecies, it can only have a harder time than the Core i7-9700K in justifying its price tag. I used 16 GB dual-channel Corsair Vengeance 3000 MHz DDR4 memory with both CPUs, Zotac GeForce GTX 1080 AMP Edition graphics card, along with a Samsung 512 GB 960 Evo SSD, Corsair H100i RGB Platinum cooler, and Corsair RM850i PSU. I used MSI's MEG-Z 390 ACE motherboard for Intel CPUs and for AMD CPUs, Gigabyte's X470 Aorus Ultra Gaming. I used the latest build of Windows 10 with both Spectre and Meltdown security patches installed. With overclocking, I use a vcore of 1.425 volts with AMD CPUs and find the maximum stable frequency. I've found my AMD Ryzen 5-2600X sample hits 4.2 GHz, and it's done this on most AM4 motherboards I've tested too, so that's what I've used here if you're interested in overclocked results, which I've included. For the Intel Core i5-9600K overclock, I managed 5.1 GHz, and as I've found with a lot of Intel's recent CPUs, you generally hit a limit with heat fairly quickly above this. I used a vcore of 1.3 volts to get here, which was the lowest stable voltage for this frequency, with temperatures getting too toasty much above this. Ashes of Singularity saw a far smaller difference between the two CPUs than with Intel's 8-core CPUs, with just 2 FPS separating the minimum frame rates. The Intel CPU's massive overclock did allow to edge out more of a lead. Deus Ex remains stubbornly in favor of Intel CPUs, but you'll see this gap close significantly if you use memory in excess of 3000 MHz.